I live in a pretty magical place. I am surrounded by the countryside with cozy winters, the kind that make you want to stay inside with a good book and a hot cup of cocoa. People come from miles, states, and even countries away to visit and experience the heart of Amish country. I think that whenever we live in a certain place, we tend to take it for granted. We don't pause enough and look around at the beauty and wonder that is in the place in which we live. We miss the wonder that is right in front of us. One of my favorite things are the many barns tucked throughout the farms in our area. Each one is unique, with different features and functions depending on the needs of the farmer. They stand tall even as they age over time. I believe that a barn is a metaphor for someone's life. They start out strong, built on a firm foundation with wooden beams and a fresh coat of paint. Throughout the years, the barn faces storms of hail and winds that beat on the exterior boards. It carries the weight of snow and the heat of summer. The boards wither and bend, and the paint chips and peels away. Over time, the barn has been through a lot, and the barn is older, distressed, rustic, and charming, and there is just something magical about that. Oh, the stories it could tell. We too face storms in our life. We face pain and struggle, and yet we still stand tall, even with our brokenness and our hardships. We are filled with love and hope and grow in character and live through seasons that serve a purpose. Barns can be restored, and so can we. I am starting a new series on my channel called Rekindle the Artist in You. Rekindle the Artist in You. Look around where you are and observe where you have been planted. Get inspired and be encouraged. Join me as I bring you ink and wash paintings that you too can paint along with me. If you haven't created art in a while, this is for you, so that you can get back to your love of art and create something beautiful. While I draw my barn, let me tell you a little bit about my creative journey. I love art, all things art, ceramics, painting, drawing, collage, sculpture. My go-to mediums are pen and ink and watercolor and mixed media. I have had a love for art since I was a little girl. I loved art class, art clubs, summer art camps, and I hated math and biology. School didn't come easy to me. I had to work hard to get good grades, but art class was my favorite place to be. It just came naturally to me. My high school art teacher was Mrs. Yoder. I tear up whenever I think about her because it was Mrs. Yoder that saw my talent. It was the first time someone said, "You're talented," and encouraged me to apply for college. She suggested a 2-year university to start, and I did. From there, it was a bachelor's degree and then finally a master's degree. Something changed in me during college. A spark for learning began to grow, and it might sound silly, but I loved school. I loved to learn, and the difference was the focus on art. All of my classes were so fun. I got straight A's and made the dean's list and declared my major as fine art and graphic design. Today, I teach others and I love it. I continue to learn because we never stop learning, and my desire is to help others on their journey with art. But let's talk about the years I lost art. What do I mean by that? There was about a 10-year gap that I barely created anything. I still loved art. I had spouts of creativity. I did pick up a paintbrush from time to time, but it was a hobby. It remained a hobby until I started naming it my art business instead of a hobby. I know I'm not alone and that there are other artists who created artwork when they were younger and then lost that art due to a career, raising a family, moving, or even an illness. All things that stop artists' creativity. None of which are a bad thing, by the way, except for an illness, of course. I switched gears when my 4 kids were in middle school and grade school. I started taking art commissions, and I started to design logos and websites. I did some book design and some cover art, and I illustrated children's books. I was kind of all over the place, but I was back at being creative on a regular basis. I rekindled my love for art and made it a priority. I started naming myself as an artist and illustrator, and this made all the difference. Have you been there? Are you someone who used to love art and creativity and you lost it somewhere between the younger version of yourself and your present self? Know that you are not alone and it is never too late to pick up a paintbrush. Join me as I help you rekindle your love for art. Kind of sounds like a commercial, doesn't it? Let's do that again. 23. Much better. Well, let's get into this barn painting. If you would like to join along with me, I do have a downloadable version of this barn available on my website. You can go pick it up. It's free. You can print it off on watercolor paper, or you can trace it onto watercolor paper. I'm using mixed media paper. That is also a possibility because it holds water as well. Once you have it downloaded, secure it to your desk with some washi tape or some painter's tape, and you can join along with me. The colors that I am using are dioxine purple, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson hue, Persian blue, and I put down some of the cadmium orange hue, but I ended up not using it. So you can skip that one if you want. Yellow ochre, and burnt umber. It's important to select colors that will work well together when blending. The first thing that we need to do is put down just a light blue in the background, and I actually mixed my Persian blue with my ultramarine blue. It was a cold and dreary day, so the blue is just a little bit not very dominant. Then I mixed my crimson hue with my purple. And what I'm doing here is a glazing process. So you put down a light layer, and then you darken that layer and you put it on top, and that's called glazing. In watercolor, you start with the lightest colors and you work your way to the darker colors. And so keep that in mind as you're working forward. I am using a Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor brush, size 12. There were stacks of wooden pallets up against this barn, and so that is the next thing we will work on. And I have mixed my burnt umber with my yellow ochre to put down the first layer, just keeping in mind that the white of the fence needs to stay white. And you can dab or remove any excess if you get down too much at one time. And remember, this first step, you're just putting down a base layer and you're not really focusing on any details just yet. I'm going to put that same color along these dried up corn stalks that are still kind of pushing their way through the snow. You can see them left over from the fall. Next, I am going to mix my burnt umber with the yellow ochre and along with some of the Persian blue, making sure that the barn is dry. I can go over it and not worry about any bleeding occurring. This doesn't have to be perfect. Just moving your brush through with a very light pressure. Don't use heavy pressure because you want to rely on the tip of your brush. And then I'm also going to add that same mixture to these fence posts. Again, the burnt umber and the Persian blue, creating that darker tone. Again, no details, just laying the color out for right now. I'm going to take that same mixture and fill in the window. And then I'm going to go back and pick up my red and purple mixture and fill in that little window there. Okay, now we begin some of the details of the pallets being stacked, making sure that you make space in between each of those pallets with that mixture of the burnt umber and Persian blue. Make sure that you don't get any on the white of the fence. And this is the second layer in the watercolor painting that you, or the ink and wash painting that you will be putting down. you're going to take that same dark color and put it throughout the stalks of the corn. Giving it a second layer and a bit of dimension. When you're applying that, it's like making little hatch marks with your brush. Next, we're going to go in with a darker red, and it's the red and the purple mixed together. It's going to give you the darker tone, and we're just going to glaze over the top of what we already have. I want to make this barn look a little withered, and so I'm going to keep parts of that lighter shade underneath that we had glazed down prior to this coat. Okay, we're going to go back to that Persian blue and the burnt umber. And this is how we're going to create our darkest color. I like to mix these two colors instead of getting out my black paint because I have already put down the pen and ink. And I want the ink to be the darkest. Even though they're very light strokes, I want them to be the darkest. So I let the pen and ink be the black, and I bring in other ways to create the darker shades. Don't want to forget that window or door, maybe a door to the barn, just on that top level. And then I'm going to go in with the darker tone of burnt umber and Persian blue to create those darker pieces throughout the palette woods. This is really where you're going to start seeing some more detail. And this isn't about perfection. This is really about laying down the paint in just the right places so that that white fence post begins to protrude forward and the darkers push back into the painting, giving it some dimension. I'm also going to put some of that along the stalks of the corn, giving it a third layer of contrast and interest. And the second layer throughout the trees, making sure that you're using light pressure with your brush so that you just use the tip of the brush. And then another glaze on top of the barn, making it darker. And I really want it to be dark underneath anything that's going to cast a shadow. And also this little door or window, and allow the pooling to kind of take place at the bottoms and not the tops of each of those little sections. Okay, I'm going to go in with one more dark layer just to give all of my boards that dimension and really push that back, also adding it to the door and the window. And then over the tops of the trees one more time. So I like to think of this in 3 layers. You have a light layer, a medium layer, and a dark layer. Next, I'm going to bring in my watercolor pencils. After I have completely let my painting dry, I come in with my watercolor pencils. The watercolor pencils that I'm using is a crimson red, white, dark umber, and I didn't show it here, but later I bring in goldenrod for the corn stalks. So I'm just going to start with that crimson red watercolor pencil, and I'm going to create lines for the boards that are on the barn. This is just going to create some detail in the piece. And once I get all of those down, I do take my number one cat's tongue watercolor brush, and I, with light pressure, go over each of those lines. This is a little time consuming, but it activates the watercolor from the watercolor pencil and just allows it to be brighter on the page. I'm blending it in just ever so slightly, but my main focus here is to keep the edges of each board bright. Next, I take my dark umber watercolor pencil and I go through each of the branches. I'm pushing up and out. This is really where the details come in to the branches. There are no leaves, and so you really need to make those branches a dominant feature in the trees. This is where I take the goldenrod and I place it throughout the corn stalks. I'm making hatch marks with the pencil. So I'm laying them down. I'm picking up the pencil each time. No rhyme or reason. They don't need to go the same direction. They're kind of at a diagonal up and down. The natural bend with each stalk. Nothing in nature is perfect, and so I always tell myself that whenever I'm doing this kind of thing, that every mark that I'm making does not have to be perfect because we do not live in a perfect world. I'm also taking that number one cat's tongue watercolor brush, and I am going over the watercolor pencil marks that I have just made, just activating that paint. And then I'm going in with the crimson red and the dioxine purple to create some more shading in the barn. And then I'm taking the white watercolor pencil and I'm just adding some distress marks to the barn itself, so it looks a little withered. And then with some water, I'm going to grab those darker tones again and just add them throughout the white of the snow, giving them a little dimension with some shadows. And there you have it. We have a completed barn. I hope you enjoyed painting along with me. Be sure to share your paintings with me at #myartpixie on Instagram if you'd like me to see your final piece. Join me for another Rekindle the Artist in You series. I will be doing several. Let me know in the comments below something that you would enjoy painting, and I'll be sure to place it within the series at some point. Until next time, bye!